Welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to Stonehall Sports with me, LP Cruz, and another episode of LP's Open Mic Night. So the Cowboys wrapped up the preseason on Friday, beating the Seattle Seahawks in a very exciting game, and exciting for good and bad reasons. Good because you saw the potential of young players like Sam Williams and Israel Mukuamu, and bad because you saw the whole spectrum of bad, really bad, and just okay when it comes to Josh Ball, who, by the way, will play a prominent role in one way or another. Also, not to make too much of last night's game or Friday's game, because for some players it may not matter, being almost inconsequential. However, I'll mention it here and there just to further my points. But before I get started with today's video and the long format of LP's Open Mic Night talking about the 53-man roster, I ask that if you like the video, leave a like, and if you want to see more, hit that sub button. And also, if you want to hear my thoughts on college football, hit that link below for my new podcast called The Freshman 15. And with that said, let's get to it. And starting us off is the quarterbacks. So on my roster, I have two quarterbacks, Dak Prescott and Cooper Rush. In the case of Rush, he's the guy by default because he hasn't been pushed by Will Grier to take his job. Grier's an okay athlete, an okay arm, but nothing special. And I think that's what's going on, is that Rush is kind of comfortable as the number two, and it's predicated on, being honest, is a game last year he had against the Vikings on Halloween. Had a great game, and I think for the coaches, that's kind of sticking in their mind of, okay, we can trust him for the interim process. And I think that's what's sticking him on the roster right behind Dak Prescott. And also, I just seen that Ben DiNucci has been waived. To his credit, he's gotten better, a lot faster for, with the processing, getting the ball out of his hands, but not enough to make the team. And that's all right. So I have Dak Prescott and Cooper Rush as the two quarterbacks on the roster. Next, we have the running backs. The number one is no doubt Ezekiel Elliott, who should be healthy, should bounce back. And the front office absolutely loves Ezekiel Elliott. Maybe to a fault, maybe to their detriment, but they love Zeke Elliott. The number two is Tony Pollard, who should be a nice change of pace guy, and also should get more chances on the outside, in the slot, or anywhere else that they try to find a space for him. So I think that's a good thing with Pollard as the number two. I have a 3 and 4, that being Rico Dowdle and Malik Davis. And the reason for that is there's no fullback on the roster. So you have 4 running backs on the roster with no fullback on the roster. And a small note, but I think the running back from Harvard, Champlin, was a good player. Just didn't have enough room to make the roster, but I think could be a practice squad player. Find a spot somewhere down the road for the Cowboys, or if not, somewhere else in the NFL. And then the receivers. Starting with locks. CeeDee Lamb should be an absolute lock this year as a top wideout. I'm seeing 1,600 yards, 12 touchdowns. I think he's going to be a monster all season long. Big time player who's now found a good connection with Dak Prescott with no one to take his targets early in the season. I feel like he's your number one out the gate. Number two, I have Jalen Tolbert, who I think just needs more chances to play with Dak Prescott, who I think has a very high floor already. A very young player, a smart player who I think understands just how to get open in the NFL. And I think he'll do fine right away. So he's my number two to start. Number three is Noah Brown, who can play wide out, who can cover kicks. And Noah Brown has gotten a lot better as a receiver, where I feel like he runs with more nuance, better route runner that we saw over at Oxnard, and just kind of he's got it. Kind of feel like he gets it. He understands. So he's my number 3 on the roster. Number 4 will be Kevontae Turpin, who can return kicks, who they've been very deliberate in how to get him the ball, whether it's in space in the preseason, reverses, just anywhere possible to get his hands on the ball. This team wants to see what he's got, and he's making the team. He's the number 4 guy. Then for number 5, I have Simi Fehoko. And for the Cowboys side, in my mind, they want to see that project through. He's big, he's fast, he can play in the slot, good red zone threat. And I think they want to see what he's got. They want to kind of see what happens with Fehoko, and he makes the team. And also, he should be active more often now, probably as a guy who covers kicks as well. So Fehoko, I find, as the number 5. Now, the thing with Gallup is what makes things a little bit weird at the bottom of the roster for receivers, or the depth chart for receivers, because you have James Washington and Dennis Houston. If Gallup is on the roster week 1 and he's hurt, then that means Houston and Washington are off the team. They're cut. Now, if Gallup is on IR, PUP, or whatever the case may be, then your 6th guy should be, I believe, Dennis Houston. So they'll cut the veteran receiver Washington, stick with Houston, and also bear in mind, this is the Dallas Cowboys. They will take a draft pick or a UFA over a veteran anytime possible that is close. Been plenty examples of that. So I can see them in a case like this where they pick Houston over Washington. And if Gallup is hurt, then all bets are off for both guys. So keep that in mind. And also, if they do keep Gallup on the active roster, remember, Part could play to fill in some spots at receiver. And also that could help out is the next group, that being the tight ends. So for tight ends, I have 4 guys making this roster, and I'll tell you why. Schultz is on the franchise tag, and beyond this year, I'm not sure. But for now, he's the unquestioned leader of the pack. So you get plenty of chances, plenty of targets. So he's your number 1 tight end. Ferguson fits in right in behind him. Good pass catcher. Can block a little bit that we saw in that game against Seattle. Then the number 3 guy is the undrafted guy from Indiana, Peyton Hendershot, who's very similar to Ferguson as an athlete. A little bit more juice. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Blake Jarwin. But those 2 guys are good options there that put some pressure on Dalton Schultz in a good way. And then you have the 4th guy is McKeon, who I think is the best blocker of the group. So he finds himself on the roster based on being able to block. So if you have a 2 tight end set, maybe a goal line package, your first 2 guys should be Dalton Schultz and McKeon. So I have 4 tight ends on the roster in this space. And then as the tackles go, 1 tackle being on IR, Tyron Smith, and his injury then presses Tyler Smith into the roster, I think, as the number 1 left tackle week 1 against Tampa. So you had Tyler Smith as your tackle. Ball, like I mentioned, should be the swing tackle. And it's a problem. It's worrisome, but that's their mind right now. It's going to be Ball as your swing tackle. Well, Let's Go should practice more and more, in my opinion, making the roster. And I think what happens ultimately, he'll surpass Ball as a swing tackle. So we'll give that some time. But Let's Go is going to be your guy right there as your 3rd tackle. And then your 4th tackle on the roster is going to be Terrance Steele, who is the starter. Still kind of unsure about him because I feel like he's had a bit of a regression in preseason and practices that we've seen. We're not too sure about that. The only plausible thing is the Cowboys could do is come out with their initial 53-man roster, then find somebody else from the outside to bring in. But for the official 53-man roster initially, I got Terrance Steele there. Well, Let's Go, Ball, and Tyler Smith. On the guards, for guards, maybe a little bit light here, but your left guard should be Connor McGovern, who they've given plenty of time to play in as a left guard, a lot of snaps, and again, being very deliberate about that. So he's your left guard, is Connor McGovern. Matt Farniok kind of fits both sides of a center, but also a guard, so give you some flex on the inside with Matt Farniok, who I think, and I'll talk about him more in a second, but Matt Farniok fits in really well here. Your 3rd guard being the All-Pro Zach Martin, who should give Dak Prescott a much cleaner pocket and get Dak Prescott back to where he was before. So definitely want to see a lot more from that spot with 3 guards. Then when it comes to centers, you have right now the incumbent is Tyler Biadasz, but that may not last for too much longer. I think Farniok has made a lot of pushes and strides to get that job. So if there's any problem where you have Biadasz struggling, you might see Farniok take his job. But for now, your center is going to be Biadasz. And another guy who didn't get a lot of burn or a lot of talk to put himself in the conversation was Alec Lindstrom. I know he was signed as a UFA. People were, really excited about that one, to what he could do, but just didn't make enough. Didn't do enough to stay on the roster. So I seem to be cut and he's gone. So that kind of closes up my offense. So far on offense, we have 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 6 receivers. And again, depending on what happens with Michael Gallup and his status, if he's healthy or on the roster, he makes 6. If he's not on the roster, that makes 6 still with Dennis Houston. Then 4 tight ends and 8 offensive linemen. Then we have on the defense, and I'll start with the edge players. So on the edge players, I have as absolute locks is Tank Lawrence, who's back on the team. We'll see about the stats beyond this year, but Tank Lawrence is back. Dorrance Armstrong off a new contract, probably starting in the base packages opposite of DeMarcus Lawrence. Then we have the wild card in Sam Williams, who will see a lot of action if somebody goes down, but an exciting prospect in Sam Williams. And then we have my number 4 edge will be Chauncey Goldstein. He can play outside, inside, has actually put on some weight, looks bigger. So we want to see what he's got there too. So we have 4 locks at the edge. Now for me, kind of a tough call is going to be what happens with Fowler and Basham. It's kind of hard to pick. because you have Basham, who's a veteran, and then you have Fowler, who was brought in. But I'm going to go with Basham here, and because he just keeps making plays, making a lot of plays, getting his hands on the ball. He's just somebody I feel like the team can trust him to play in a pinch. And then when it comes to Fowler, I feel like Fowler can't cover kicks, can't play special teams, and he's had some issues with just discipline, penalties, and I think that's part of what's going to have to happen to get him off the roster. I think there's going to be a renewed focus on playing football the right way, playing with focus, playing with just smart football. And Fowler, I think that might be where you make an example of a player based on numbers, but based on just your culture and changing the way you do business. Also, one edge that was cut, I was told today, was Marquis Bell, who's off the team. Mike Tafua, also off the team on my 53-man roster. And then changing gears over to the interior D linemen, the inside guys. So without question, we have Gallimore and Osa Odighizuwa, who were turning a corner last year, and I think will only get better, given the Cowboys a very disruptive interior presence and a good front in the middle. Osa is very quick, like I said, disruptive. I think he was one of the brightest spots of the defense. Just gets glossed over really easily. Easy to lose track of that guy, but he was very, very good last year. And then we have, coming back in my mind, Carlos Watkins, a good, solid veteran, just a steady player on the inside. Bahana, the big interior guy, the one tech, should make the team no problem. I mean, he's big, a space eater. I want to see a little bit more from him, obviously, but I feel like they like what he's got. And then this might be a hot take for some of you guys, maybe not, but I feel like you have to keep Tristan Hill. You have to. And I think in my mind, he's been the best interior D lineman of the preseason, making plays, getting in the backfield, getting sacks, turnovers. You got to keep him in a contract year. Now, here's where it might be a hot take, but I feel like you have to make a choice on John Ridgeway. For me, just keeping it $1,000, he's been a little bit underwhelming. I haven't seen what I was expecting, and I feel like that's okay. That's not a problem, not a big strike on him, but I feel like he's been just okay. And so therefore, in my mind, and I'm sure someone's thinking this too, you can cut him and sign him back on the practice squad, and he'll be fine. I'm pretty sure if you let him go, he'll clear waivers, you'll bring him back, you're fine. So I'm letting go of John Ridgeway. Again, not so hot take, maybe hot take, who knows, but I'd let him go. Then the linebackers. Of course, you have Micah Parsons, who can do everything. Speed up the edge, can play inside. Micah Parsons might be the best defensive player in all of football right now. So if you want a hot take, maybe that's a hot take, but Micah might be the best player in football on defense, bar none. Better than Aaron Donald or whoever you want to talk about, whoever you think is the best player on defense in football. Micah might be the best player on defense in the NFL right now. But keeping up with that same tip of linebackers, Leighton Vander Esch also is back, who's had a good camp, looks healthy, played last year as a rusher as well. So they're going to find a spot for him on the team, in my mind. Forgot about Anthony Barr, but Anthony Barr is a newcomer. I think they want to get him kind of acclimated, bring him along slowly, see where he's at. But he should be a core player and just a good, solid veteran backup. And I don't think, to be honest with you guys, I don't think that Barr will play a lot of snaps. And that sounds crazy considering how much fans wanted to sign him and he was being lobbied for. But I really believe that he's going to be signed, but he won't be heavily dependent on as much as some may think. Very similar situation last year to Malik Hooker, where it's a player that the fans are clamoring for. They want him really bad, but once he's on the team, he's just a guy who is a depth piece. And I think that's probably a good thing for this team and for him and for the Cowboys. And then I have Luke Gifford on the roster as the number 4 linebacker, who's just a guy who can play wherever you ask him to. Mostly a guy to play special teams. So I got Luke Gifford. Jabril Cox is a guy who I think is why you'll see less Anthony Barr. Cox being able to cover, and I think the Cowboys play nickel so much that you want to rely on a very good coverage guy like Jabril Cox, who's healthy and allows the Cowboys to go light at linebacker as well, considering what they have at safety and how they play their safeties with their linebackers together. Which means guys like Malik Jefferson, the veteran signee, and the draft pick, Devin Harper from Oklahoma State, will not make the roster, and they will be cut. My take on those guys at linebacker. And then talking about the cornerbacks, we have Anthony Brown, deserves a lot more respect than that he's been given over his Cowboys career. He's a very good corner, had a great year, who actually, believe it or not, may be an ascending player and getting even better than last year. Very could be. He's a great counter opposite of Trayvon Diggs. And speaking of Trayvon Diggs, who's an all-pro, Diggs can cement himself not only as the best corner in football by following up that great year, but also playing for his money, playing for his bag. I think Trayvon Diggs has a legitimate shot to earn himself a lot of money this year by just following up a great season. So we'll see about that one. And then number 3 in the slot, you have Jordan Lewis, who basically no one came to take the spot from him. The Cowboys in that slot are kind of treading water where they're okay with Jordan Lewis. I don't think Lewis is a great option at slot, but you could do worse in the NFL. You certainly could do worse, but I think he's an okay option, which means if he's not being pushed at the slot, there's something to be said about Kelvin Joseph. And Kelvin Joseph, I think, and not only Kelvin Joseph, but also Nahshon Wright. Those two guys have been kind of tied at the hip all offseason, and it's because they have not been very good in camp or the games in preseason. Both seem kind of slow to see what's happening in front of them. In Wright's case, not really playing the ball well in the air, which is a trait that you want him to have. He's a guy who's very big, very long, but has not played the ball in the air very good, especially down the field. Kelvin Joseph kind of getting beat across his face a lot, maybe not reading things as fast as he should. Which makes their situations kind of interesting in the sense of, I feel like with Joseph in the game with Seattle, he left the game. Maybe he had a concussion, maybe a neck injury, I'm not sure. But my gut feeling is that what they're going to do with Joseph is they're going to stash him, which means they're going to put him on IR just to buy more time with him, because I don't feel like they feel comfortable enough with him to play right now. And how the numbers work, they might say, okay, let's sit on him for a little bit, put him on IR, and then we'll think more about him later, which isn't a bad deal. Not a bad choice, which puts Wright in a kind of a funny spot, because Wright's not only playing against himself as a corner, but also to play special teams. And his team has CJ Goodwin, who's a core player on that side. Bones Foster likes CJ Goodwin a whole lot. They brought him back several times with several contracts. So it's going to be funny what happens with Wright and CJ Goodwin. But I think what the team is going to do ultimately, and I think it's probably a bad idea, is really to pit not just Goodwin and Nahshon Wright, but pit Deron Bland against Nahshon Wright, which I think might be a mistake. Knowing this team, I think they're going to get kind of coy and sneaky and try to cut Bland to sneak him onto the practice squad, which I think is a mistake. But cut Bland to get him on the practice squad and pick Nahshon Wright to keep with Goodwin for whatever reason. So in that regard, they go 5 corners, cut a player who is playing decent to sneak him back on the roster in Deron Bland, which means safety falls last year on defense. With safety, you have Jaron Kearse, who I think is going to be healthy and fine to play week 1. Had a bit of a back issue, but should be all right to play. And again, the way the Cowboys play their safeties and linebackers, they're able to go a little bit light at both spots. But you got to like what you have with Jaron Kearse as a safety. Malik Hooker has depth, can play down in the box, can also play deep third. Very flexible tool at safety. And then this guy, Israel Mukuamu, who I think has made too much of an impression to not make the team. He's played corner, he's played safety, he's gotten turnovers. He's been playing really well, and too much to ignore to cut him. He's on the team, no question. Also, another guy who I think makes the team is going to be Marquis Bell, who pretty much kind of played a similar role to Donovan Wilson in years past. And I think he's on the team just because you want to hold on to that guy who I think has been steady all the way through, all off-season, preseason games, camp. Marquis Bell's been a steady player all throughout, and I think he's on this team as the 4th safety, which means it boils down to Tyler Coyle and Donovan Wilson. For me personally, I'd rather move on from Wilson and let Coyle play out. I like his size, I like his speed, I like that he's a decent athlete. But what I think will happen is that they're going to pick the experience of Donovan Wilson over Tyler Coyle, which makes sense, which leaves them there with 5 safeties. And then when it comes to the specialists, no surprises here. They're going to pick the kicker, that being Brett Maher, who has no competition in camp, is running unopposed. Maher is still, for me, going to be a question mark because he still has a bit of that guy of being very inaccurate, kind of not being able to combine his accuracy with his power, and it goes both ways. To where he's accurate, maybe long, but it's short, or where he's long enough but wide right. It's going to be, it won't leave you comfortable. And to be fair, you shouldn't be comfortable with Brett Maher, but they are apparently. Punter, we have Ryan Anger, Pro Bowler, experienced punter who should hold it down there with no problems and no issues at all. And then finally is Jake McQuaid making your 53-man roster. So that said, on defense, we have 5 edge guys, 5 interior D linemen, 5 linebackers, 5 corners, 5 safeties, 5-5, 5-5. So hopefully that's good luck right there. And then with the 3 specialists, we have 53 guys on the roster. And that would be yours and maybe mine, your 53-man Dallas Cowboys. So those are my thoughts. But let me know what you guys think. Am I off? You guys have something kind of similar to that? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. What you guys thought about, my thoughts on those. And once again, thank you guys for watching the video. As always, like, sub, all that stuff. And always, Cowboys up. Peace.